welcome to the first Tea with Julia of 2018. Now, the new year is supposed to be about new beginnings, and this whole business of New Year's resolutions. I don't know if you know this, but New Year's resolutions were once more than just resolutions. In Anglo-Saxon times, this was the oathing season. And at the new year, the Theod, the tribal community, would renew the oaths that bind them as a community for the year. Over the years, this became resolutions, and now most of us don't even bother with those. I'm constantly making resolutions all year round. It's a bit of a struggle. So I thought, rather than looking forwards, which I don't really feel able to, especially the way the world is, and it's all a bit worrying, I'll look backwards, and I'll look backwards at 2017 and at what has happened in 2017. So I've got basically three things I want to talk about today that happened over the last year. Two are happy things, and one is quite a serious, sad thing. I know I haven't talked about serious, sad stuff on the programme before, but I feel maybe that's something I should do more often. If we're talking about 2017, the really big local story from my point of view is that 2017 was the year Eastbourne's LGBT community finally pulled it off. We had the Mardi Gras. We had this event which, in one form or another, we'd been talking about holding for a quarter of a century. I mean, I can remember discussing it with Maureen, and she's been dead nearly 22 years. Because at one point we were thinking of holding it in one of those small parks off the avenue. But really, Eastbourne as it was in the 90s, although actually we had a bigger gay community then, it really wasn't a goer. People in this town, despite having a huge and very, very noticeable gay community, you know, principally the catering workers, would not really have been up for that in the early 90s. There was an indoor event held. In fact, I think there might have been two on consecutive years. In the early 2000s, I think, around the turn of the century, a bit like the first Notting Hill Carnival was an indoor event, we did have an indoor Eastbourne Pride, and I remember it being very good at the time. It was enjoyable, it was quite a blast, and we had the rainbow flags up and everything. For the time it was good, but unfortunately the momentum didn't get carried forwards, and it didn't carry on, and nothing much happened. Until last year, really, and it's all been, to be honest, it's been since Betty Gallagher took over, as she's now the third person to head up Born Out. She's their third chairman so far, and I think because her other half, Mandy, was involved in the original London Pride in the 1970s, Betty managed to get a team around her that actually managed to succeed. They pulled it off, and a lot of people thought they wouldn't. A lot of people wanted them to do it, but thought it's never happened before. 25 years of hot air, not much achieved, it's not going to happen. But it happened, and despite a lot of opposition, a lot of very nasty opposition, and most of it did not come from the quarters you'd expect it to. Most of the Christian fundamentalists were like, well, you're all damned, if you want to do it, fine. It wasn't. It was from within the community, and it was very nasty, and I never understood quite why that was the case, but that's how it was. Nevertheless, she pulled it off. Unfortunately, one friend of mine who's quite elderly missed the whole event because he went to the wrong park. I wasn't there. I didn't see anyone else. Yeah, well, unfortunately, it was at Prince's Park, and he'd been up to Guildridge Park, bless him, so that was a bit of a sad loss. But again, that's very Eastbourne, going to the wrong park for Pride, you know. We've got two parks. I don't think we've got three. It's the kind of thing that happens here. I know it's sad that the guy missed out on it, but let's face it, it's the kind of thing I'd do on other days. I nearly didn't make it because I was late and had to catch the Dotto train. Although we've decided it might be an idea if it became traditional to go to Eastbourne Pride, as it will be called from this year, by Dotto train. They ought to lay an extra Dotto train on. So we're all looking forward to what's happening, and I think finally pulling off the Mardi Gras has given the town the kick it needed. It's given us a lift as a community, because we've been in retreat for a lot of years. We've had a lot of internal problems, and things have not been happy. And I think Mardi Gras just gave us that lift. And I did worry for a bit, because it put so much stress on the organisers, all of them, that I thought, well, you know, they're going to be too exhausted after it to do anything again, certainly until next year's. But no, it's given us the boost we need as a community. Mardi Gras has been like an injection of life into the local LGBT community. I've had a bit of soul searching. It's about an acquaintance, not a friend, someone I just knew around the clubs, who died in the summer. And should I really talk about it? Because they've still got friends and family out there, and in a way I'm cheeky because I hardly knew them. It was just someone I used to run into in clubs. But they died. The thing is, they died in an autoerotic accident. It was an extreme bondage practice, and they died in it. So in a way, I feel that I'm not outing them. It's not like friends and family didn't know. In fact, the Daily Mail pretty much outed them by giving every detail away in their newspaper. I do feel that, I apologise in advance if friends and family don't see it this way, but I thought I'd talk about Zoe O'Brien. The reason I want to talk about it is because there were a lot of stupid American frat boys on the internet, most of whom didn't even realise that it happened in England, not America, passing comments about Zoe without ever having met her. I didn't really know her, but at least I'd met her quite a few times. And also because there's something that I think needs saying, and in her case it was public enough as part of her death that I think it's all right for me to talk about it. You see, people talk about the fact that she was trans and got harassed a lot for her appearance, which we all know unfortunately happens. People talk about the fact that she died in a bondage accident, but what is not so widely known is that she was not just someone who did that. That was a big part of her life. She was a group organiser. She fronted clubs. I believe she was the founder of the Brighton Road Club. She ran Brighton Munch at one time. She ran quite a few organisations in that area. And she'd been on that scene publicly for about 20 years. She went back into the 1990s, really pre-internet or early internet era, when it was all very different. And I think that kind of needs to be remembered. The reason I got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about Zoe, who I didn't know very well, is that I don't think she was treated very well, but I'll get to that later. I was walking across the railway station, and as happens, once in a while, I will run into people who knew me in my BDSM club days, a scene that I've left behind years ago. And this guy, we stayed and we had a coffee, and he said, "You were right." I said, "Well, right about what?" And he said, 5 years ago, you said she'd kill herself in a bondage accident. And I said, "Well, I'm hardly Nostradamus. We all knew that. We all knew that she took very extreme risks. She was an edge player. We knew it was dangerous stuff she was doing, and she used to let us all know it was dangerous stuff she was doing. She hardly hid it." But the odd thing was, having not seen her for 2 years or more at this stage, only about a fortnight before she died, someone else that I knew from the old days was sitting having a cup of tea with me, and he brought up the subject of Zoe, and I think he thought because we were both tea girls that I had some kind of connection to her, and we were still in contact. I hadn't actually seen her since a friend's birthday party a couple of years before. And she was on very good form that night. We were seated at the same table, and she was really good company. Because Zoe, sometimes she could be extremely haughty, but usually she was very good company. I remember the first time I ever met her, she was kneeling handcuffed on the floor of a bar. So, the reason I bring Zoe up is she was treated extremely badly by her people inside her own community. She was, I believe, treated unfairly by the BDSM scene, and that includes other LGBT people in the BDSM scene. Because as a group organiser, and someone who had a certain amount of background in that scene, she did not like abuse. She was unhappy about the way things were developing, and I mean, she said it publicly that she would call out abusers. And I remember being at an event way back early in the current decade in the Hastings area, and people were ostracising her. They were treating her like a naughty child. It was like Zoe's on the naughty step because she publicly said stuff about people being abusive in the scene. And she got a lot of harassment for years, during the last years of her life, because of the public stance she'd taken against kink abuse in a scene that she loved. And the silly thing was, she kept fighting them. You know, most people, a lot of kinky people have left that scene in the last 10, 15 years, and most of them leave with little excuses. Oh, I found I outgrew it. Yeah, after 30 years, you know. They come up with these excuses. I left, but I left with a lot of fuss, which didn't do me any good, and it's not the way I would have liked to have done, but that's another story. But Zoe kept fighting. She stayed in there. She started founding new organisations when she was run out of her old ones. And there she was, being run out by Johnny-come-latelys who'd taken it up in the previous few years through the internet, spouting all this Californian nonsense about not criticising other people's dynamic. And there was poor old Zoe being treated like a villain, with people spreading nasty stories about her, branding her an informer and all this crap. Sorry. And I thought it was shameful. So that's why I brought it up. You know, I'm not outing her because the Daily Mail did that. I don't want to stir it up. And if I've got the story wrong because I didn't know her that well and I've been away from that scene for a lot of years, then I apologise. But I honestly think that Zoe was treated shamefully, you know, by her own community. And not all the bad people are chavs. There are bad people in alternative communities as well. And whistleblowing in them is, you know, this is why people... Why didn't they out Jimmy Savile? Well, this is why, you know. Because if you're a whistleblower, you'll get treated worse than the person who does it. And that's true of almost any part of society. And that's why I brought up the rather sad issue of Zoe's death. From what I knew of her, I liked her. I think her death was unnecessary because she took stupid risks, but she took risks with her own life and limb. What she wouldn't stand for was other people being abused, and I got a lot of time for that. Of course, 2017 was, as he predicted it would be, the year of the Fabulous Robbie. I remember we were going over to Seaford, if you've seen my film about the day in the spring that we went over to Seaford, and he said to me that it was going to be a very significant year for him. And blow me, it was. It was. Everything. It was like this year, all roads lead to the Fabulous Robbie. So in the early part of the summer, he was doing a lot of art stuff, and it was quite, as you'll also know if you saw the Brighton film where I missed his exhibition because I got the date wrong. So this happened with the dentist recently as well. This happens a lot with me. As you'll know from there, he was doing some quite conceptual stuff then. You know, it was moving in the direction of conceptual art. But then, as the year went by, Robbie got really into the performing arts direction, which surprised me. I mean, didn't really see Showbiz Robbie coming up. And I suppose that reached its height in October when he appeared in a rap video. And I thought, that's the way he's going. He's going to go into performing arts. Because Robbie's a bit like, I mean, older friends like Maureen, who's no longer with us, who were Bowie boys in the 1970s. I'm a bit too young really to remember that, but Bowie always had these changes of direction. You know, it's Ziggy, it's the Thin White Duke, it's these different... And Robbie, in a way, is similar. You have different directions of Robbie, and he's kind of keeping up with them. But the thing with Robbie is they're not erratic. One direction grows logically from the next, but you don't know that till it's over. I remember someone saying that about Charlie Parker, that the thing about his solos was it all made perfect sense, but only after he'd finished it. And that he was the first person like that he'd heard. And Robbie's like that. Robbie goes in a new direction, you think, oh my God, for a few minutes. And you think, yeah, of course he was going in that direction. He knew it, the rest of us just couldn't see it. In October, the rap video came out, and then I didn't see him for months. No one saw him for months. One friend saw him on the railway station. It's like, but I can't stop, because Robbie's a modern man. He keeps his office in his pocket, and he is always off on the next project or into something, can't say. So I didn't see Robbie for months. None of us did. Anyway, about Christmas, and I hear a rumour. And it's quite an interesting one. Robbie has now got another direction going. You know, before the end of the year, it's the third direction. And the same thing happens. I'm thinking, what's he doing that? And you think, of course he's doing that. That's the obvious thing for Robbie to do. But the trouble was, It was only an unconfirmed rumour. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really want my show to become a rumour mill. You know, this is not a gossip column. I don't want to spread irresponsible stuff that turns out to be not at all true. So I wasn't sure whether to broadcast it or not. And then peculiarly, I think it was just into this year, I was just going back to work, and Robbie turns up with a damn great artist sketch pad under his arm, and this is my new direction. And it was indeed what I'd heard in the rumour. Robbie has gone into ceramics, and he showed me about 5 or 6 very interesting designs. Floral but simple. We tend to think of floral as fussy. Profusion of flora, it makes sense. But actually, if you look at some plants, they're very minimal. You look at a tulip, you know, this arch of its stem, and it's like that. They're very simple, very elegant designs, and I'd be quite interested if I get a chance to see them actually translated into finished ceramic works.
So yeah, looking back, I rather wish I'd done that.
So as regards 2018, well, it's always a bad idea to look into the future. It's going to be this, it's going to be that. And for me, I started the year off with a dose of norovirus, which was not exactly fun. I've got to do a lot to my flats. Heather's helping me with that, and there's a little bit with varnishing and things like that, making it a bit more civilised. And I've certainly got some plans to restore myself a little bit this year. So that was my 2017, and hopefully we will be having more teas with Julia in a bit. So get some cup of tea and drink tea. Make tea, not war, as Monty Python said.